All right, well, welcome. Good evening, and thank you for coming to our second webinar of the series that we titled Strategies That Work, Inclusive Literacy Instruction in the Social Studies Classroom. My name is Sandra Grudich, and I will be hosting today's session and the series as a whole. Throughout the series, we will engage with the topic of the Holodomor, the man-made famine in Soviet Ukraine, using carefully selected historical resources to model and practice literacy strategies in an authentic and meaningful context. By grounding our work in real historical inquiry, we aim to demonstrate how literacy instruction and content learning can reinforce one another powerfully. Today's session, Webinar 2, Unlocking Complex Text, Practical and Inclusive Reading Strategies, focuses on equipping educators with practical tools to help all learners access and comprehend the complex texts often found in social studies classroom. Participants will explore inclusive strategies such as pre-teaching essential vocabulary and scaffolding inference instruction that support reading comprehension across a range of ability levels and linguistic backgrounds. While I am hosting the series, today's session and the series as a whole will be mostly delivered by Nicole Richardson. Nicole holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in social science education, along with 18 additional graduate credit hours in psychology to support her dual enrollment teaching. Over more than 20 years in the classroom, she has taught a wide range of social studies courses, including traditional IB, AP, and dual enrollment in both in-person and virtual settings. Nicole has worked with students from diverse backgrounds and ability levels, consistently applying evidence-based strategies to support retention, literacy, and critical thinking. She's a member of the Ignite Innovative Group for New Ideas in Teaching and Education, professional learning community dedicated to research-driven approaches to social studies instruction. Her commitment to inclusive teaching is also shaped by her experience parenting and teaching her own neurodivergent child, which deepens her dedication to making learning accessible for all students. Before we begin with today's webinar, I just want to remind you and highlight that our last webinar in the series, the third one, titled Making Writing Manageable, Scaffolding Techniques for the Social Studies Classroom, will take place in April. And if you didn't register yet, you can do so now. So before we dive in and before I turn it over to Nicole, I just want to say that last time we did go over a brief introduction of the Holodomor in sort of like as part of the content, and then we dove into strategies for retention. And if you didn't attend that webinar, you can access the recording on our website. Today, we will not spend a whole lot of time introducing the topic itself, but all of the activities that we will take or that we will introduce to you will essentially deal with the topic. And also what I need to say, and I've said it last time, we have an entire unit plan with full resources, PowerPoints, and everything ready to share with you after the third webinar. We will both share it during the webinar, but also email it to all participants of all three webinars. And in that way, you will have pretty much all of these already named within the unit plan. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole and she'll get started. I believe one more thing that I needed to say that'd be great for me to say is that last time she introduced several really interactive and fun activities through a resource called Lumio. And when we sent out evaluation for the webinar, we were sort of told that you would like to know more about it in general. So I think Nicole will start by just introducing how to register for it to get a free access to Lumio, where you can then pretty much do many of the activities. This is not the only software that we're using, but it is one that she has used a lot last time that I believe some of you wanted more clarity on. So thank you. I'm going to stop right here and turn it over to Nicole. Nicole, go ahead.
Thank you, Sandra. And so before I dive into Lumio, was there anyone that did feel they needed a brief overview of Holodomor before we dive into this? I don't want to leave you hanging if this is something that you're not real familiar with or don't know what it is. because we can do a quick overview of it if so. Is everybody good? All right. Let us know if you do. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and jump right in. And so I can go ahead and show you before I start to present more of today's material, how you can set up a Lumio account. And as we go through it, I can show you some of the different ways that you can use it. Please feel free to stop me and interrupt me at any time if you do have questions. I won't be upset by that at all. I do tend to kind of talk fast and dive into things really quick. So don't hesitate to let me know if I can clarify anything or expand upon anything. So let me actually share a different screen here to show you. I had to log in and pull it up on a different browser to show you how you can log into Lumio. Let me switch here. Okay, so I'll put this link in chat and I'll share a few links with you today
Nicole,
in the chat. Yes.
because you had a different browser with, oh, now it switched. We were still seeing your old screen.
Yeah,
Now we're
might be a
seeing.
little bit slow
Yeah, that's okay.
in here. All right, so well, see if this will let you pull the link up. It came up as a hyperlink. I can see if I can paste it a different way. Will that let you pull it up?
Yes, sorry, I was
Okay,
saying yes and I was muted.
making sure. I
Yeah.
can also put in there we go. There's the text of it. So to sign up for your Lumio account, you can come right here to sign up for free. So this is just another interactive software, kind of like Nearpod or Pear Deck or Genially. What I like better about Lumio is the fact that it's free. Nearpod and Pear Deck have their free versions, but they limit you on the features that you can use for free. And most of the most useful features, of course, you have to pay for. Lumio only makes you pay after you use a certain amount of space. And I've used quite a bit of space and I haven't had to pay for I haven't had to pay for an account yet. And you have full use of their features even without the paid account. So that is something that is nice with Lumio. So you can sign up for your account here. And there are a number of things that you can do with Lumio. When you come in, actually, let me finish editing and I'll show you back on the home page of my account here. So when you set up your Lumio account, all right, you'll see up here they do have a Lumio library where there's a number of other presentations and interactives that you can search through from other teachers or that Lumio has put together that you can use. And then the ones that you create yourself or that we share with you would be here in your library.
Nicole,
So
we're
if
still
you're,
seeing the sign up
oh, thank you.
screen.
Yes, let me switch back. Here we go. All right.
We're still seeing the same
Yeah, it's
screen.
taking a second.
Yeah,
Should be
okay,
fine.
there we go. All right.
So here's the back to the Lumio library I was referring to when you couldn't see it. And so here's where you can search through their resources by grade level, subject, to find pre-made presentations and activities if you would like to use that. Then you would have your library right here. So this is where if we share one with you or you create your own, this is where you would find them. So you would click Start New to present to your students. And so we will look at that some in just a moment when I show you some of the activities. Here we have, I'm going to show you though, you would edit file to create your own, or you would start, from the beginning to add a new one, of course, for your own. But once you're in here, the other thing I like about this is you can set these up just like you would a Google slide or a PowerPoint slide. It's not going to have as many animation features and that sort of thing for presentation, but it's very simple. If you want to, you can see here, I can add a slide. And you have so many options that you can use. So, and I'll tell you some of the advantages and disadvantages for different ways that you can use this. So I tend to do a lot, and I'll show you examples of this today, just basic drag and drop activities. So you would just for that, set up a blank slide. You can see here they have different templates if you wanted to use them, but you can just throw in a blank slide. Oftentimes, what I will do is I will use a blank graphic organizer or something of that nature to put as a background. So like you'll see examples here for something we'll do today. So I'll just put that in the background, and then you can add the text boxes, with different information that you want students to be able to manipulate and move around on the slide. And I'll explain that to you a bit more as we get going. You can see here where I've done that and added, possible answers that students will be able to manipulate and move around to complete the graphic organizer. But Lumio also has where you can use their pre-made templates and features. I showed some of these last time, so you can watch our last session if you want to see some of these demonstrated. But they have game-based activities, so like Match 'em Up, where you're going to be, and I can show you examples of some of these just very quickly in a moment, where you can match, different terms and definitions or something along those lines. You can do similar with Super Sort. So like I had one in the last lesson where we were comparing industrialization and collectivization and having students look at examples to see if it was industrialization or collectivization. So this just kind of gives you the template that you would be able to add. And for this one, they have it kind of already set up. You just put in your categories, your answers, and then they would create that for you. So those are, again, if you use their pre-made templates. They've got here with response, you can do basic multiple choice or short answer, true, false. You can add a poll, shout it out. They can literally just, all type in their different responses to something. And so you can have a board showing all the different responses that they have to a topic. So there's lots of different ways that you can utilize this. And so what I think we'll do is I'll go ahead and kind of jump into some of our content and show you and kind of let you know how some of these can be used. And then at the end, if you'd like, I can show you some of the other options that we looked at last time for those of you that were not here. And that way you can see examples of like how the multiple choice looks for students to use, how some of the matching games look for students, and we can play around with those at the end. Any general questions with this before I get started? All right, I will go ahead and jump in here. So I'm going to actually come out of this view for now, and I am going to go in here to how it would look for students. We'll use this for a couple of things today. So what this is, if you would like to, go ahead and you can scan the QR code, go to lumioclass.com. I will also put a link. Oops, I can go back to that. I can also put the link in chat for you to pull up. And you can I always tell students, just put in your first name so you don't have to worry about any of the security issues or anything like that. I know some districts I've worked in have been very strict about that. So
And I will add that
get
it
right
is
in.
easier if you do it on your laptop because it tends to be really small on your phone. So,
Yes, so I do recommend if you're on a computer, it definitely will be better on the computer, because some of them are tiny. And I do encourage you, as we go through and look at some of these slides, if you don't worry about even getting correct answer, if you're at the end of the day brain dead, you don't want to think about things, but at least go in and Christmas tree it, move things around, because I will then be able to show you even when students, so that you can see students' answers, what it looks like when they get things wrong or when they get things right, and kind of how what you would see as the teacher as students complete the activity. And so I'll have the teacher view up on the screen, and then you'll have the student view on your device, and that way you can kind of see what both of those look like. All right, and so I'm going to be jumping between the Lumio and some slides and other things. So I'm going to kind of go to some slides right now, or actually, let me see. Let me go ahead and show you, for those that are new, let me just kind of very quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just so you can see like the examples with the matching slides and that sort of thing. So this is one of the Lumio pre-prepped games because I'm not really using a lot of these today. I'm using more of my own drag and drop slides, but just so you can get an idea. So for this one, what you would do, and this actually will relate a little bit to one thing I can talk about with vocabulary for today. So you would just for this, you've got like your terms here on the left. And if some of you want to try to do this, you would just drag down, like it says quota, the photo that would represent quota here. And then if you need to see the photos bigger, you can click the little square at the bottom to see what those are. And so you would drag the word here and you drag the answer here. All right. And then if they match, they go here. You can see if students get it wrong. Okay. So I'll just put a random one here and here. You'll see it'll just bounce back. And so it's just kind of a quick formative assessment, can help students check their comprehension, and then what you would, the teacher view, what you can see with their progress is you can see how they're doing. So we see we've got 6 students in progress on theirs, 2 that haven't started. You can come here to student progress. And of course, we wouldn't show, students' names. This would just be my view on my computer. I'm just sharing now so that you can see what this looks like. So you can kind of see where each student's at, how they're doing on it so far. If you click on a person's, and again, just kind of randomly do some of these, because then you can see, okay, hey, here's how they got ones that they're missing, ones that they're getting right, how many they got correct on the first attempt. So it gives you some of that data that you can use to see how the students are doing, and if you need to review a topic or something like that that you had just gone over. And then again, you've also got the class overview, and as they complete, then it'll actually give you the results for how they're doing on it when they complete. So if you need to get that data as you're going through a lesson, these are great little quick activities that you can just throw in the middle of your lesson and get that student engagement, check their comprehension, help that background knowledge stick. We talked about a lot about how that was useful in the last session. And so this is really a great way to do that. So the Lumio pre-made activities, this is what I was talking about, where you can go to the matching, or there's the multiple choice options. These are the ones that will give you that data. So that's where these are useful. I like to use a lot of the basic drag and drop ones where I just create a slide and I have students move things around on the slide. So that would be something like this, where I just put the graphic organizer in the background and locked it down on here so they can't move that. And then they would move around the items on the screen to match the definitions in the pictures. This gives you a lot more flexibility for how you can set this up. You can make your text different sizes, which you can't really do with the Lumio pre-made activities. So you have a lot more flexibility here, but there's not the automatic checking and student data. So this is something I would just use in a lecture where I would set this up, and then we would maybe have students work on it on their own, or you can set it where they can work on it as a group. And then we would go over it as a class together just to check their own learning without getting the actual data. So you could, have a student share the student's response like I am now and let them help explain it, check answers, that sort of thing, to go over the content. So lots of flexibility in how you can use this and get that student engagement. So today we're focusing really for this series, we're looking at literacy and improving student writing and those sorts of things in the social studies classroom or whatever content area you might be coming from. But since we're looking at, the Holodomor lesson, one thing that I really emphasized last time, we talked about making this background knowledge stick and how that background knowledge is key to literacy and reading comprehension. And so we really spent a lot of time on that. And so really that first part of the lesson is foundational to reading complex text as well. So this really goes hand in hand with what we are doing today. Today we're going to look a little more directly at the actual student reading strategies and components for helping them understand reading those complex text on their own better. So some of the things that research shows with looking at reading comprehension, especially in the secondary levels, and for a lot of our students that may struggle with reading. And, a lot of this I geared for, some of our struggling readers. And if you have higher level kids in AP, IB that don't need this, then there's definitely easy ways to scaffold it up. However, what I think is important for us to keep in mind is that I know in Florida, we've got a little bit different situation with how, some of these kids get pushed into AP and IB classes that are still maybe really struggling readers. I don't know how much that's the case in other states. But I think that often we do have those high achieving kids that work so hard, and those hard workers that sit in our courses that really do struggle still academically. And they've gotten by because they are such hard workers and they do try so hard, but they may be really struggling to understand this text. And those are the kids that I think just get overwhelmed and sometimes overlooked and really need that additional support, especially in our upper level courses. And then, of course, in some of your regular level courses, if you're having a lot of students with that are English language learners or having different learning disabilities, a lot of these strategies can be really useful. But I think one reason why a lot of students struggle so much with reading comprehension and writing is at this level is, after a certain point, we really stop directly teaching it. And I feel like, those early grades, and I've seen this even with my own kids, those early years, there's that huge push through for literacy through like third grade. And then they take those, standardized tests, third grade that are in our state. That's where they get held back or not. That's really the foundational year. And then all of a sudden, like magic in fourth grade, they're just supposed to be able to read to understand. And I know for my own son who's got some disabilities related to reading comprehension and writing, and all of a sudden in fourth grade, they're handing him a social studies book and saying, hey, read and take notes on this text. And that was just, so overwhelming for him and going right over his head. And when you've got a kid sitting there with, reading disabilities and ADHD or other disorders, that's where they shut down, and you start to get a cumulative effect because now they're losing out on that background knowledge because not only are they struggling with reading, but now they're expected to learn their social studies that way. And they're losing out on that key background knowledge that would help them understand future text. And so it's really important. The research shows instruction should be highly structured, directed response and questioning, very systematic, modeled, scaffolded, and intense. So some things to remember as we're looking at these different activities, what you're going to want to do is model it, directly teach it, and teach it as it relates to your content, but teach it and demonstrate it and how they can make connections between different concepts in their reading. And again, I'll elaborate more on this as we go, but model it before you expect them to sit down and do it themselves. And then even before, rather than model and then jump into independent work, model and then do that kind of guided practice. Have them try it on their own on Lumio and try some of these examples and matching some of these up, and then review it with them, see how they did, and talk it through and do some of that practice before you kind of set them out on their own to do this. So some of the factors that research has shown is essential to comprehension includes working memory capacity and other executive functioning, background knowledge, motivation, vocabulary, text coherence, and text structure. We talked a lot about background knowledge last time. Today, we're going to kind of focus on these three with the vocabulary, text coherence, and structure and activities that you can use. In addition to some research articles that I use more for today, a lot of what I talked about last time was from the Writing Revolution and Beyond the Science of Reading. I'll highlight more with the Writing Revolution next time when we talk about writing, but so much of this overlaps. Literacy and writing, it's all one and the same. It all goes hand in hand together. But one quote from here that I liked that relates to what we'll be looking at today. Any knowledge building curriculum will incorporate skills and strategies. The difference is that instead of trying to teach a particular skill, Using a text chosen for how well it lends itself to demonstrating the skill, the focus is on the text or the topic, and the skills and strategies are brought in as appropriate to help students think about the content. In addition, instead of assuming students will have somehow just picked up the knowledge that will enable them to apply the skill, a knowledge building curriculum will provide that knowledge. So we're going to talk about some of the kind of more reading strategies and those things that you can teach students to use as they're reading, or to help build those reading skills. But instead of where, like in English, they might teach them about a cause and effect text structure, and then they find these different random texts that fit that. We're going to kind of do that reverse direction. So you're going to look at the text that you have and that you're using for the content you're teaching. So we're going to look at the readings we have for Holodomor and see which of these strategies, which of these graphic organizers will fit, and then teach that strategy within the context of the content that we're teaching. And so you're getting this knowledge-rich content that's going to simultaneously build that content knowledge and their reading skills. And this will feed into their writing skills, as you'll see next time as well. So one of the first things that we will look at here is this idea of text coherence. So when I first kind of heard about this, and it makes so much sense when you think about it, but one of the things that a lot of our students at the secondary level struggle with is making connections between different concepts presented in text. You know, really understanding those cause and effect relationships, understanding you know, sometimes it may not explicitly define a term, or it may not explicitly, you know, state the relationship between two things. And that's what, you know, the literature calls kind of low text coherence within a text. And a lot of our secondary text is a lot more complex than students are used to or maybe prepared for. And so, you know, we've all been there where students are maybe, you know, oh, it doesn't define the word in here. I don't know what it means. It doesn't tell me. And it is in there, but they have to make some inferences to understand it. Or maybe they have to look back to the previous sentence to understand what it's saying. And so there's a number of ways in which students may struggle to make those connections. Or you have a lot of students, and this is actually the case with a lot of our students with autism and learning disabilities that may struggle with reading comprehension, where they have what's called weak central coherence. And that's exactly what we're talking about. They struggle to pull together the ideas. You give them the sentence, they can understand it. They may have a high verbal IQ and know the basic vocabulary, but when it comes to reading the whole paragraph or article and pulling together the big ideas, they struggle, and they get stuck on certain details and things like that without getting that big idea. So a lot of this, you know, idea of cohesion is looking at the way vocabulary and grammar are used to make connections between concepts. Things as simple as different linking words, conjunctions, and things like that. And what we want to do with them is show different ways that they can find these in the text and use it to comprehend it better. And so we want to explicitly teach students about these to help improve their comprehension. So I'm going to show you a few examples of this. So some of the different, what they call cohesive devices, or different ways to make those connections between text. You've got like linking words, referring backwards, looking forward, connecting paragraphs, and let's look at what some of these are. And I'm going to show you and share some of the articles that we'll be using and including in our lesson plan. That and this will show you how you can use the articles to teach students and help them understand these texts better. So actually, let me skip here first to linking words, because this is the most basic idea. I'm going to go in a little bit different order than I set it up in here. So basic idea with cohesion, okay, is these basic linking words that you find in text. Again, the conjunctions, the transitions, things like that. Teaching our students, again, especially your struggling readers, your English language learners, things like that, teaching them how to look for these words in the text. One of the recommendations is to have them highlight things like this as they read, so that it draws their attention to those relationships, and then using that to make connections. I'm going to also talk today about the use of graphic organizers, and the idea is we want to make connections between all of this. So, hey, here are words that indicate cause and effect in the reading. Here's a way you can structure and use a graphic organizer to take notes on this and understand this better. And, these are the kind of words that would go with this type of text structure and graphic organizer. And so we're going to be looking to make those connections together. So, for example, in the Nicholas Worth text that we have here, so let me actually share really quickly. So this is the text that we'll be providing in our lesson plan, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a link to this for what we're looking at today. Let's see here. Where did share go on here? I'm looking right over it.
You might need to just share the link that's opened because you already
Just
opened.
make sure that it will, I'm not sure, but we'll share that way. If not, we'll share this with you later. I've got copies on my slides of what we need to explain this. We'll see if this will pull up for you though.
Yeah, it does. I mean, well, no.
Or if you want to pull it up, Sandra, it's the Nicholas Worth text. If you pull it directly
No,
from
I clicked the wrong thing. Hold on.
in Google Drive, if you want to.
It does open for me. Does it open for
Okay.
anyone else because I have access rights? Can anybody confirm they can open the last link, please? Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. Okay, so this is some examples. So just as you give students a section of text, and again, you might want to start with showing students examples of this on the screen and helping them make connections between what the showing examples between what these words indicate. Okay, so like in this first example, you have a quote from the article where it says, "The very few who still work are unable to fulfill quotas. Consequently, they do not receive enough bread and begin to bloat." So, have students highlight things like the word consequently. Have them talk about, okay, what is the relationship between this, sentence here where you've got the surviving peasants that are too weak to fulfill their work. And then what is the effect of that? That they didn't receive enough bread and they bloated from starvation. So you're teaching them to kind of highlight, recognize that. And then another piece of this that I'll talk about today, and I'm going to just kind of jump between these two because they really do go hand in hand together, is using graphic organizers to teach these different types of text structures and that sort of thing. So that's where you may jump to, and I will share this link with you as well. Let me go ahead and share this with you. This will give you a variety of graphic organizers. There's a couple that I put in here directly for our lesson plan, but there's also a number of blank ones in here that you can just use as templates. So I'm going to put this in here for you now. Oops, I just pulled up your email. Hold on. Click the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. Copy link. Okay. So this has, so for example, with cause and effect, there's different graphic organizers for different types of, did I put the cause and effect in here or it's in my Lumio? I apologize. I'll add those to this link for you later, but I'll show you my examples here of cause and effect. I thought for sure I put that in there. Does somebody see the cause and effect in there?
I don't think it's there.
Okay, I'll show you in here. Oh wait, no, it's here. Sorry. Okay, so like for cause and effect, yeah, so here's an example. So you could have, if there's multiple effects, you could have one like that. You could have one like this, if there's multiple causes you want students to pull out, or you can have a basic single cause to single effect. But teaching students to kind of get that visualization in their head of, okay, when I see consequently, when I see these certain linking words, that this is what they can visualize, and teaching them to use these graphic organizers to take notes and interpret the text, and providing these for them so that they have a focus when they are reading. So you would give them some of these different options depending on your text, and they can and then they can fill that out and start to make those connections in their head. Another example of the linking words in that Nicholas Worth text that you could use for showing contrast, you've got The vast majority of speakers, secretaries of district or regional committees deemed Moscow's collection plan unachievable. Nevertheless, the delegates ratified the 1932 plan under pressure from Molotov and Kaganovich. And I apologize. I need Sandra to help me with pronunciations on these. So um, but here you see have students point out that nevertheless, okay, is that powerful connection there. And so again, if you're having students read an article that's comparing and contrasting something, you should have a lot of these linking words throughout there. And that's going to help the students then fill out their, graphic organizer that they can use to, compare things within their reading and make those points, because then the goal eventually too, as you get into the writing portion, we'll talk about this more next time, is then for them to use these words. So teaching them in the reading to comprehend how they're making these connections, and then to later use those in their own writing. But you would be surprised, how many students, if you can also give them, and this is something you could even set up in Lumio, I might add this before our writing one, give them 2 sentences from the reading to check their comprehension of it, and have them choose a list of conjunctions for how they would connect this together to see if they understand how this event causes this event, or how one is different from the other one. Is it comparing them, contrasting them? A lot of students struggle to make those connections. And so really highlighting that language and teaching them how to explicitly use it to understand what they're reading can be very helpful, especially when used in conjunction with those graphic organizers and teaching them the structure of the text. Something else that, if you are a strong reader that you don't think about, that students struggle with related to cohesion, is this idea of referring backwards. So this is where, authors a lot of times may use devices to make references to other parts of a text, and you have to look back to see what they're talking about. Okay, so for example, they have this little snippet of text here. So you've got the Australian Prime Minister has called an early election. This is just a general example I got from this website. The date was selected to coincide with the start of the Olympic Games. This decision. So again, students have to look back at the previous sentence. May seem obvious to us, or if you're a strong reader, it's not always for our students. And so this is something that I think you can use to really, if you create reading guides and any kind of guided reading questions, or just in discussion in class after they read something, asking questions that focus on this to make sure, okay, well, what decision was based on this? And asking them those questions to make sure they're thinking to look back. And again, going through, having them highlight this in some of their readings can help check that comprehension. So making sure they understand that the date refers back to the election date, this decision refers back to the prime minister calling the election, those sorts of things. So in our Nicholas Wirth text, you have over 4 million people starved to death between the fall of 1932 and the summer of 1933 in Ukraine and the Kuban, up until Gorbachev's, Sandra, please help me.
Perestroika.
Thank you. The strategy was never spoken of in the USSR. So here, again, highlighting this tragedy. What tragedy are they talking about? So he's using that demonstrative to refer backwards. So explicitly teaching students to highlight that and realize, okay, wait, I need to look back and see what strategy, if they're not naturally holding those connections. That first point we talked about, that's important for reading comprehension, that we won't dive a lot into for our purposes, but was working memory. A lot of students that have learning disabilities and are otherwise neurodivergent struggle with working memory and holding multiple things in their mind at one time. So when they've moved on to that next sentence, they may have already forgotten about what they've read in that previous sentence. So really drawing their attention to help them go back and make those connections is really important for them to do. Another example here, beginning in February to March 1932, reports by the secret political department of the OGPU sent to the Soviet leaders mentioned isolated sites of food problems. These were confirmed by, I'm going to let Sandra help me again.
Posior. It's okay. It's
Posior. Okay, I don't want to butcher things. So
okay.
phrases like these reports links the start of a new paragraph directly back to the specific intelligence document. So again, just making sure that kids are getting the connection. You have the same thing with looking forward. The following dates have been proposed, the next issue to be discussed. Again, if you're having students fill out that graphic organizer and they're having trouble figuring out, the order, have them go through and highlight things like the following weeks, to get them prepared for that transition in a historical timeline, anticipating what happens next, the following day. So I think there's a few things you want kids to learn to highlight here. You've got, of course, the sequence, but also the immediacies, because then you're going to be looking at, possible direct correlation and consequences in their response to some of the information, and that can be very informative too. So I'll reference back to some of this again later. So having kids go through, highlight this, talking about what that means, what the linking words, I would have them. So is this showing a cause and effect relationship? Is this showing compare and contrast? And making sure that they can make those connections would all be really important. So other ways that you can use some of this gets into, and let me, yes, please just let me know other questions and things that you guys have.
No, we would just have a comment that says, as a community college instructor, I want to uplift that these techniques are also invaluable for my college level students.
Awesome. And like I said, I think we neglect that fact. I think we kind of make that assumption. At first I was, like earlier when I was thinking about, I don't know if it will all be relevant for AP and IB. I'm like, yes, it will be. Like, because I've sat in there too, and I've seen, I think community college, of course, you may have even more need for it. But I know even in some of those APIB courses, Sandra and I taught together, and we could probably both tell you several students we knew that were such hardworking kids, but they struggled with reading and writing. And so they got by, but they really needed this kind of support, and they needed that help. And so I think, and this kind of gets into that universal design for instruction too. I think that the more we can make things like this available for all of our students, the better, because when we just naturally make it available, instead of making those assumptions, that student sitting in the back that's scared to ask and feeling dumb and doesn't want to speak up, we're going to be giving them that support they need, and it's going to help our other students as well. It's going to really help them all across the board. So having them highlight those words, and I know until I read about some of this for my own son, and I had to really dig into the research to see, hey, I've got a kid who's got an above average IQ, verbal IQ, his vocabulary is fine, his, basic scores on when he did his testing related to vocabulary and fluency. He can read to you all day long, no problem. But yet that comprehension piece was a huge struggle. And so as I dove into the research, this is really where a lot of his struggle was. And it made so much sense once I saw it. And when you really try to get those connections highlighted, that's where it breaks down. And so that's something, again, that's not explicitly taught, especially in the context of our social studies text and those types of things where they really need to make those connections. And so it can really be helpful. So right along with this would be using graphic organizers. And actually, let me go back here to text structure. This is also interchangeable. It's like kind of go back and forth between all of them. Trying to decide the order was a bit challenging, because really looking at the text structure, looking at the graphic organizers, using those connectors all go hand in hand. If any of you are English teachers, this is probably very familiar to you, or if you've got elementary kids, this is a huge push in, part of what they look at in elementary school in their standardized testing and that sort of thing, is understanding different text structures. So is this cause and effect? Is it compare and contrast? Is it sequence? Is it descriptive? The challenge becomes as you get into high school level, it's more complex. And so you may not have the whole article that is, compare and contrast. You might have a paragraph that's comparing and contrasting. And then we're looking at cause and effect in another section. And so it becomes a lot more complicated. And so that's where teaching students to use and look for those connecting words and that sort of thing is really critical, so that they can recognize this throughout the text. And so attaching, and then where this is especially useful is when you're teaching text structure combined with the clue words, and the graphic organizer. And that way they can really start to get the visual to go with it. So like for the graphic organizers, you'll see in the document that I provided, and I'll add, I have some here in this slideshow, which I can also share this, and then some in the link I shared earlier. And I can add some of the others in here. But you can see with these, I have 4 different types of text structures. So this one, chronology for a sequence. You could use another text structure, and then you could have a chronology with the timeline and dates, or you could have the sequence where it's just of a process, first, second, third, that sort of thing. Here's another one that you could use. Then you have your basic descriptions. That you could do the concept type maps for in filling this in to kind of define a concept. Argumentative is more what we would be using for this lesson. And so they could use this to outline, a key argument that author's presenting, and then what their major, claims with that are, what's evidence to support it, details, those sorts of things that they could break down in these graphic organizers. So the goal would be to teach them, hey, here's the words to indicate cause and effect, or, compare and contrast. And then here's the graphic organizers that you can use. And then that way they're going to start to really build that mental image and that schema for what they need to kind of get a framework to understand the concept. And again, this will then feed into their writing as well. But
Nicole,
anytime yes.
I just wanted you to remind them that in Lumio, you can actually upload entire PDFs. And I don't know if
Yes.
you were going to show them
Yep,
that, but you
I
can
was.
upload the PDF and they can type it in and you can follow their progress if that's something you'd
Yep.
prefer. But you can also print them out and do pen and paper like we typically would have done in the past.
So here's a couple of things you can play with to show you that here. So here's, for example, with the, okay, so first here, actually, let me show you this with the timeline. So there's a couple ways you can do this with the sequencing and the timeline. This one I had made for in the context of the lecture, more for just building the background knowledge. So after teaching, and this is in Lumio, here's one where you can have students actually, and you guys again, please go on, just play with this, move things around, don't worry about getting it right. Just so you can see. Now, this is one that I just set up. I put in the background and made the things for them to move around. So it's not going to give me the data for how they're doing. But you can see here the students can move these things around on the screen and put them with the appropriate date. So you could have them do this as they read. You can have them do it as a formative assessment at the end of the lecture. I did also put in the handout that I gave you, the very first slide, if you wanted to, instead of doing a presentation for that first piece of the lesson, if you wanted to have them read one of the articles we provided, or that we will provide in the lesson, you could have them use a graphic organizer like this and fill in the descriptions as they go. And that's another way that you can do this. So, but giving them that graphic organizer, teaching them to look for that first, next, then, is going to help them, be able to fill these out more on their own. Some research shows that this, partial support of, helping them fill it out, giving them the options can sometimes be more effective than having them do it completely on their own. So having, again, that teacher guidance and explicit instruction is going to really be beneficial. So you can do it, have them handwrite it on their own and have the paper copy as they read. You can have them do this as a formative assessment after teaching it. There's lots of different ways. You could also use this one that I put out here as a note-taking guide. So you might have them fill this out as you do your notes and then use this as a quick fun formative assessment. This gives them visuals to look at with it, things like that. You might not be able to print this out for all of your students, but you could, have them do this at the end to check their understanding. Another one showing this is with the cause and effect graphic organizer. So same thing, I set this one up here. You can grab some of the different options from the top and the students can match causes and effects in the graphic organizer here with where they would go. So this would be one I would just have them give it a shot on their own. Again, this is going to kind of provide that scaffolding that's so important and let them try it on their own first. The cool thing with this is no pressure for the kids. It's not for a grade. It's low stakes. This is truly for their learning. Other students, I would not be showing it on the screen like this if I were teaching it in class. They don't have to be embarrassed about getting it wrong. You just want to see them. And you can see, actually, side note on this, I told you can't get data, but you can go through like I was, and you can scroll through and make sure the students are doing it and make sure they're working. So if you want to see that they are participating. And that's what I usually do. I'm like, I want to see everybody at least try it. Like, I don't care if you get it right or wrong. I want you to at least try it. And so you can kind of scroll through, make sure that they've started the activity and that they're working on it. And then I would just go over it with them at the end. If you want to provide more of a challenge, then you can give it to them, and then you can type in Lumio here so they can provide their own effect. And so you can click here on the A to add text box, and they can click, and then they can just type their own answers and put it in themselves, and then you can let them share, discuss as a group what they got, and then that way, you can get a little bit more challenge for students that may need that there, or you could give them a blank one to fill out on their own as they read a text. So again, just several different ways that you can utilize this, and different ways. What I love is it's so easy to scaffold up and down for your students. I know sometimes it's so hard to find time to provide that differentiation. For something like this, I just, I make this slide, I duplicate it a few times and delete some options for one level of student and keep them for the other. And so depending on which group I'm working with, I'll pull up a different slide, and it's so easy to do that for. Another one with compare and contrast, this would go with, and this is something you could use with, we have an article here about comparing the different types of international crimes. And I know I pulled that one up here right before we started. Let me see here. Here we go. So distinctions among the different crimes. And this again is something we'll share in our lesson plan. If I can get the link to work here.
I can do that. Don't worry. I'll
Okay,
share.
thanks. Yeah, so if you want to add that one or share that one. So yes, you could have them read about the different types of international crimes. Eventually, what we're working to in this lesson, the final kind of product is going to be them producing a writing about arguing whether or not the Holodomor would qualify as a genocide or not. And, one of the distinctions that needs to be made here, if it wasn't a genocide, it would be at least, crimes against humanity. So looking at the difference between these two, comparing and contrasting that. So you could give them that article to read, and they could make the compare and contrast, or use this as your notes. I mean, there's different ways that you can do it. And so you could also use this as your notes in class and then have them fill it out as you go. Or again, use it as that concept check at the end and making sure they're understanding it. You could also give them the blank one, let them fill it in on their own. So again, depending on your level of students, then you've got these different options, but you want them to get that idea of looking at, compare and contrast, get that idea of the Venn diagram. Here are keywords that you would use to show these concepts are similar, these are different, and building that knowledge. But the idea is explicitly teaching it. And we talk about this, but you don't have to be a full English teacher. Just as you're teaching this cause and effect, point out those words in your reading, or put it in your slides. And really, your slides, the kids are reading. You're just kind of helping scaffold it when you're doing that. And so put those linking words in your slides and help point out how what that indicates to your students, so that then when they read, they can make those connections on their own. So you can definitely use Lumio in these different ways to make those connections. I'll elaborate on this a little bit more later in the next time with writing, but just kind of a quick example here too. There's these activities that are because, but so, which for some reason this one's not wanting to come up right now. Is it just on my end, or is it showing up on your end?
It's showing up blank, so it's not. Maybe
Let me try this
refresh.
one.
Oh,
Here's
okay,
another
I
one.
think it's coming
Okay,
up.
here's another copy. So on here, you can look at, again, explicitly, quickly teaching students about these conjunctions, and then just little ways that you can teach students about, taking the same sentence stem and saying, many scholars believe Stalin intentionally used collectivization to starve Ukrainians because many scholars believe he used collectivization to starve Ukrainians, but, and, then using it with so. So here, you're directly teaching them the, reading content and those conjunctions, but you're also having them make really important connections about the content that you're teaching, which is what in social studies that you're trying to drive home these points about intentionality with the genocide and looking at some of those contrasting points of view with but. And then this is going to build up to what we'll talk about in our writing session next time, where students can then use this knowledge to write a good thesis statement and develop claims. And so it all is really building towards that final product. And we can look at some other activities like this then too. So just making those connections between these different graphic organizers and making sure, that we are giving students something to make sure we're giving them something to write as they're working. We also have in our lesson plan for a graphic organizer, as they read, let's see here, some of their notes. Yeah, so as they're reading some of the primary source articles or secondary source articles about the Holodomor and really looking at, is it genocide? Is it crimes against humanity? Is it just a tragic policy decision? So giving them something to fill out, this graphic organizer to fill out, okay, here's arguments supporting genocide, arguments supporting crimes against humanity, but giving them that visual to complete as they're reading is going to be critical. They need that focus and a way to visualize it to really be able to make sense and understand it. But again, you're going to definitely need to model it first and provide examples for them to be able to fully comprehend it and understand it. So these graphic organizers do really help give them that framework that they can use to interpret the information, understand it better. And again, for each text structure, I would just get them used to have these ready to go every time. There's also problem solutions, another one that comes up a lot. And then description, just lots of different ways that you can use some of these. Something else, so another important component of this, and we talked about this a little bit last time, is building vocabulary. So with looking at the vocabulary, that's so important for our students. And again, especially when you have your English language learners and your some of your students with disabilities, when they get overloaded and that cognitive load gets too high when they open the article. So a couple of the primary sources that we have here, as I started looking through this article, I went through and kind of highlighted a number of words that I was like, ooh, a lot of our kids in 9th, 10th grade probably aren't going to know what these words mean. And I think I used the example last time about my student who just was really struggling with some content and on eyewitness testimony, and it was an interesting study, and it took a while before I finally realized she didn't know what eyewitness testimony was. And I would have thought, at least with Law and Order and in these shows we see on TV, that, they would know what eyewitness testimony is. Well, she didn't. Well, no wonder she couldn't understand the study. She didn't know the basic concept and the title. So once I explained that to her, then it all started to click together. So kind of going in with that mind of a student and looking to see words that they may not understand and highlighting those. So here is something cool that you can use. And I'll also show you for a few of these things how I used artificial intelligence to help me create some of these activities. Because of course, the first thing when you look at some of this stuff is like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to do that. Like I have too much on my plate. A lot of this I did use ChatGPT or Notebook LM, a few different, I jump between a few different ones depending on what I'm doing to help me with this. So this article I went through on my own first and highlighted the vocabulary words I thought students would understand, struggle with out of curiosity. So Notebook LM, if you're not familiar with it, is one artificial intelligence tool that is amazing. It's been so helpful to me recently. What's great about Notebook LM, if you're not familiar with it, you can add in your own articles. And so you don't have to worry about the problems with inaccurate information that you get when you're using, ChatGPT or Gemini. It's going to pull everything from your sources. So you can see here, like one thing that I used this to help me with earlier is finding examples of the linking forward and linking backwards within the Nicholas Worth article. I didn't have to sit there, and read the article and search for each of these. I have the Nicholas Worth article in here. So I checked that one off. I put in a website that I used and got some of my research from, check that off. And I'm like, okay, can you go through this article? And I basically asked in the chat here, can you provide examples of his use of linking words? Can you provide examples of his link of referring backwards, and they'll pull that right up with the instructional point and the example and give you those instances that you can use with your students. And so this is really an amazing tool that can really, cut out some of that legwork for you to find this information. I also, after I had first, put in the article, or read through the article and highlighted words, I asked Notebook LM to tell me. I said, can you scan this article and tell me vocabulary in there that a 10th grade struggling reader might need help with in this article? And it actually pulled up a majority of the same words that I did when they read it. I was really surprised at how well it did at pulling up the words, pulled up some simplified definitions. I then used that and put that into Gemini or ChatGPT. Those could do more of the creative work then, because Notebook LM is going to pretty much stick to your sources. And I use that to create a few things here. So I put together this glossary with some of the words for students, because again, we're wanting to reduce the cognitive load for them. Yes, we could tell them to go look it up or something, but look at all these words here that they may struggle with, and they're already struggling with the article. We know how hard it is to get some kids to read. And so having it right here to reduce that cognitive load. So I used it, I made this glossary for them, and I was able to use ChatGPT to create these images to go with each of the words. So for your English language learners or other students, or even just your other students with disabilities or that struggle, having the image is a huge help to retaining the vocabulary. So by having them have this quick snippet, this is also excellent for developing a Lumio activity. So you can easily create a matching activity, take a screenshot of the individual picture, throw that into Lumio, and you can easily make a activity for students to do on this vocabulary, maybe before they read the article. So if you want to review it with them beforehand, you could use a Lumio activity to and use these images to do that. And I can also share with you some of the prompts that I use to create this. And once you play around with the prompts too, and I kind of got what I wanted, you can also ask them, hey, what is a prompt I can use to do this more directly next time? And it will help generate the prompts that you can use. So if you want to use this in other units, you've got these visuals for the vocabulary that you can use. Another awesome thing I used it to do is translation. So if you teach a lot of where English students, where English is their second language, I put this in, and it actually can do a paragraph by paragraph or even sentence by sentence. I chose paragraph by paragraph in this case, translation. So you've got the English on the left and the Spanish on the right. So that way, they can get their exposure to both, but then to help improve their understanding, they can read the article in Spanish and then also see it here in English. So they get exposure to both of those. And again, I just put the article in I think I might have used ChatGPT for this and asked it to put it into columns. It asked me, do you want it sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph? I said paragraph by paragraph. It popped out the Word document for me to just paste onto here. So I just kind of put the disclaimer for students at the bottom. It is an AI generated translation. It may not be perfect, but it can help improve their understanding of the article and help them get a better idea. So again, just taking the article, plugging it in, and asking for that translation, it's very quick and can be a huge resource. And I'm assuming you could do it with a number of other languages here, majority of our students that are English second language is Spanish. So I just grabbed that one. So whatever it is for where you're at, you could save some of these prompts to use repeatedly with your students as useful. And so
Nicole,
those are great tools. Yes.
I had a question. For translation, obviously, translations are not going to be
Right.
perfect. But did you try, just curiosity, did you try the reverse translation to
Reverse translation, I did not on this, but I know I've done that with some of my students before.
just to make sure it actually did not
Right.
convert it into something? Yeah, that's
Yes.
something you can also do to double check if you're not necessarily fluent in the in that language, whatever
That
you're
would definitely
translating to.
be smart for sure. So yeah, I just put a note, like I said down there, that double, check, or if something doesn't make sense, you can put a note to ask your teacher as well. But the reversing it back is definitely helpful. So yeah, so I have that with this one. Same thing I did. I asked this one. I asked again, asked for it to highlight words, and it really got most of the ones that I would have picked as well. Gave the definition, the context in the text, and then able to generate the images to go with it. You do have to check it. It is glitchy, so like even with some of these images, they kind of messed up some of the, I don't know, they would, put the wrong word and picture together, so you have to kind of go through, check it. But I mean, to get these kind of visuals that quickly, for students to look at, this is the kind of thing that used to would, take us hours to try to put together for a student if we were even able to. And so it really is a great resource to have those visuals because that makes a huge difference for a lot of our kids and will really help it stick in their head. I mean, I know even for myself, I can remember in high school getting an advertisement for SAT vocabulary cards, and I can still remember the card. It was the word ameliorate, and it had a girl sitting in a wheelchair with her leg up with the nurse and talking about, it means to make better. And I can still remember that image. And so having the pictures really help support that learning for students and will help especially our students learning English as a second language. And so it's just, again, using the AI to kind of help develop some of those resources. Again, you do have to double check them, but it can be very useful. Any questions with that? So otherwise, I think that was pretty much all I had for this reading component. A lot of this will tie into what we're going to do next time with our when we talk about writing, and I'll expound more upon some of those connectives and linking words and how you can kind of move into the writing with it. But any other questions about that or Lumio or?